Hi, and welcome to O2 Tara Talks, conversations about one thing you can do right now to stay healthy in your body and mind. And first, a little disclaimer. Today's talk is for informational purposes only. Consult your practitioner for guidance specific to your situation. When that's said, I would like to introduce you to our speaker today, our guest today. Today we're talking with Diane Darling. How are you, Diane?
I'm well, thank you. A pleasure to meet with you today, Tara.
Thank you. So Diane, can you tell us in one sentence how you help people?
I help people connect authentically so they can help other people. I help them learn how to build effective relationships so they can be a resource for others.
Wow, that sounds like something that's particularly important at this time when we have all these constraints on us and social distancing, and some places even have stay-at-home restrictions now. So I think this will be a great thing for us to talk about at this time. So can you tell us what is one thing that we can do right now, Diane?
I would say my challenge to your listeners is the one thing you can do is to call one person. You don't have to call many. You don't have to send out an email blast. If I get one more email blast, just seeing how you are, as if it's a fake one-on-one, and yet, by the way, here's all the links about how you can buy. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about picking up the phone and calling one person. Think about somebody who gave you some career advice 10 years ago, or maybe even last year. Think about the person who recommended you go to law school, or you get a graduate degree, or you might want to think about X, Y, and Z. Just call one person and just sincerely say, how are you?
Wow, so that's really interesting. The people that you described are really people that you likely would not have had any contact with in some time, but have really been impactful in your life. Like you said, somebody who recommended you go to law school or whatever.
I think these are people, so when I teach networking workshops or I'm a speaker at conferences, I say to people, think about 3 people who've helped you in the past. And people are like, yeah. And it's kind of on the someday list.
Right.
Today is the someday.
Nice.
And this may be something that you wanted to do 5 years ago, or you wanted to do 5 months ago. But I would say, pick up the phone today and say, particularly if you make phone calls, this really differentiates you. And I also really think that, you can send a text and say, when my phone number comes up, it may not be a number you recognize. You helped me do X, Y, and Z. And I just like to say thank you. Do you have 5 minutes? Well, so I'm actually recommending people send a text ahead of time so they can prepare the person, or is this a good time to call you? Because you want to be mindful. Just because we're home doesn't mean we're not working.
Right.
And, for you and me who've worked by ourselves on our own, this is our lives. But It's easy. It's sometimes hard to remember that, someone might be in a staff meeting, and that staff meeting is now on your kitchen table and with 20 other people. And then there's somebody who's homeschooling kids and, all of the other things that are moving on. But I would just don't try and make this too big of a deal. I went for a walk right before our call, and there's been a guy who's a neighbor who's on my list, and I hadn't called him, and it was nice actually to see him. I will share with, I don't think he'll be watching this, but I don't think he recognized me. I've gotten my hair cut off, and I'm not sure he recognized me. And and I said, oh, I used to work with Tom. I introduced him to my neighbor who I was walking with, and he said, and where do we work together? Which was his coy way of saying, who in the heck are you? But he has been on my list, and I'll send him a text later on and say, hey, it was me. I've got shorter hair now. But it's, I think this is a time for us to be a bit reflective on that. I'm doing a Tuesday Zoom call for people. It's East Coast. I'm in the East Coast, so it's lunchtime for people in California. It's coffee time for people in Europe. It's wine time. And, I'm like, bring the beverage of your choice, and I'm doing a little bit of a talk, and then I'm having it do some speed networking afterwards for people can meet each other. And, you've got people from all around the world, but, when I dropped in on one of the conversations, it was a woman who's an attorney, and she said, our firm is telling us to call people. It just doesn't feel right. And I said, well, you're calling them not because you're trying to sell them law. You're calling them to
Right.
see how they are.
Right. Right.
And she subsequently shared the story about they had ordered some food as a pre-cooked meal. And when they got home, they opened up the box. In it were a couple rolls of toilet paper.
Wow.
And, and I said, if they had done that, a month ago, you would have assumed that the food was going to give you the runs, But now they don't sell toilet paper. But if you have an opportunity to switch to a different provider in 6 months because you get a coupon for $20 off, you're going to say, you know what? I'm good with who I'm working with because they made that one gesture.
Right. Well, so I mean, as I'm listening to what you're saying, it really it will help us. Just hearing your stories had me smiling. So I think if I were to make that one call and call somebody, I would get that same smile from that conversation with them because it's just an authentic conversation. And then, as you're saying, it could also help us later on because people are more would be more top of mind with people and just in their awareness really. Especially,
and one thing that may happen with this is that you may do some shout outs and not hear anything, and that's going to let you filter who to put your energy with in the future. It may be kind of a shout out and a clear out, so you may want to make a couple calls and check in on people and then say, you know what, a childhood friend was telling me that she, before all this happened, was getting together with some high school friends and she was all excited about it, and then when it came, she wasn't that interested. And I said, well, how often do you see each other? He goes, well, about once a year, but I've done all the work. And I said, well, maybe it's done its job. Maybe it doesn't mean they're bad people, but maybe you kind of don't need to see each other, or maybe the once a year is plenty and you don't need to see each other more often because apparently at the 1 year they said, oh, we should do this more often, and then it's kind of like, well, maybe not. And again, it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that in some cases, like I don't have children, I can't imagine what people are going through right now who are parents. I literally cannot imagine it.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't
I
mean
can tell you this, if I can interject for a second. I have my 11-year-old sitting upstairs trying to manage all of her homework online now, and we've had tears a couple of times over the past few days because it's not only the work, it's the management of the day now. All of a sudden she doesn't have that structure, she's not seeing any friends, and she happens to be a rather extroverted kid. So this is, and just the uncertainty that we're all feeling as adults is magnified for kids too, because they don't even have the same resources that we do. So you're right.
And I think this could also be a huge moment for kids, everybody to learn empathy. So if you're an extrovert and you're going a little stir crazy, guess what? That the way you live and your need to always be with other people may overwhelm others. It also may be a time for you to have an opportunity, if you're all on a Zoom call, to say, okay, everybody's going to speak up for 30 seconds or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And the person who's been sitting kind of quiet in the corner at the office meeting, guess what? You're on for 2 minutes because you matter. And that person may struggle a little bit with that moment of having that. And that might be where you make that one phone call to say, you know what, I saw you were a little quiet on the Zoom. Your opinion means so much. I really enjoy our one-on-one conversations when we're at the water cooler or, going, bumping into each other in the parking garage. I really want to help you learn how to speak up more.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love how our conversation has gone, Diane, because it's really about, in looking to make a connection with that one person, to call that one person. It's also really a whole sense of reflecting on your relationships with people and how different people are, and noticing people, giving people opportunities. So, and if we are all sitting alone, as so many of us are, we have a lot more time for doing that. So really, this is a great opportunity for that reflection.
Yeah, and an openness. So I buy domains all the time. If I have an idea, I buy the domain name. And the other day I got an email from the company saying, we're thinking about you during COVID. if you're having a hard time with your bills, let us know. We want to find out. And it was signed the name of the president. I've been using this company for, I don't know, 5, 8 years, probably 10 years. I've never seen his name before. So I took a look at, looked him up on LinkedIn, and I just sent a note and I said, I just want to say thank you. That was one of the more authentic messages that I had seen from basically somebody who I don't know. That is kind of the one to many. And he wrote me, and he gone to Harvard Business School here in Boston. And I said, and by the way, it's snowing today because he lives in California now. And he wrote back and said, thank you. It's nice to hear from a customer.
Wow. So yeah, a real authentic conversation that certainly brought a smile to your face, because I can see it as you're telling it.
Did.
And it sure brought a smile to his face. And I think that's really probably the biggest takeaway in doing these little things to connect with someone, even though we're feeling pretty isolated. That little connection point can really bring that smile to your face, and that can just change the trajectory of your day, really. So
Exactly.
yeah, I love it. And so what if you do have somebody, do you have anything, like if you do have somebody who is more on the introverted side or less confident side, is there any one tip or strategy or thought that might help them really, get over whatever the roadblock is and actually go and make the call?
So I actually think for introverts, this can be actually a gifted time, because you may not necessarily feel the same pressure of the office or seeing people out at a party and you think you should be off socializing or something like that. Just use that as a gift time. But I would maybe queue up an email or a text message and say, I was thinking about you the other day when as we're all just pondering life right now. I remember when, you gave me the advice. I was given the advice one time when at my office space that I was a perfectionist, and that, I was good, that I had high standards, but I could come across as a little bit difficult to work with, because I was always kind of trying to make things perfect instead of just accepting that, life is life. And I will always thank Stuart, and maybe he'll be my call tomorrow, but, for giving me that feedback, because I had no intention of making it hard for other people to work around me. And I was really quite shocked. And I then actually got pretty courageous, and I had some one-on-one conversations with other people in the department to kind of acknowledge that conversation that I had had with him and talk to them. And I was really taken back by how much my perfectionism had been bothersome to other people, and that I would try and have this be that way. And I'm not even that, it wasn't even that it was that neat. I don't even quite remember what it was, but I spoke recently at Harvard Business School at a conference for women, and I talked about the roommates that live in my head. Perfectionism and procrastination are two of the roommates. Self-care is the third roommate that lives in my head. But the perfectionism at times is very debilitating. I've been saying for probably 2 years that I'm going to put together some online courses of all the different topics that people ask me about. How do I repair a relationship? How do I manage my LinkedIn? How do I write a better email? How do I get over my fear of speaking? How do I walk into a room and not feel nervous? Whatever. People just ask me questions. My books are published with McGraw-Hill. How did I get my book deal? And I've had on my list for 2 years to be doing this. And I've had to really accept in the last 5 days that it's perfectionism that has gotten in my way. It's not time. I'm skilled enough that I could get in front of a camera, even though it makes me nervous to do these types of things. But I just had to accept it. So on Saturday, I just sat and recorded the whole thing. And
Congratulations.
Put together the LinkedIn class. I then also accepted the fact that if I try and edit myself, this will not get done, for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
So I found somebody to edit it, and I was willing at this moment to pay for that. That's going to be a decision. I'll decide will a good decision or not, because I think for now I'm just going to offer the class for free. But it was interesting for me just to not be perfect about it.
Right. Well, that's
just not be perfect. And so I would say to your introverts, don't do this perfectly. Do it.
Yes.
Make the call. And and if you remember the first time you drive a stick shift, for those people who've ever driven stick shifts anymore, like the youngins haven't, the first time you do it, it's pretty bad.
You're going to stall.
You know? And also, you don't do it in traffic. You don't do it on a highway. You do it in an open parking lot where no one's going to see. So if you're trying to, maybe I would say for people who are listening to this and they're nervous, don't pick the top person you've been meaning to call. Pick somebody, like a neighbor who you're just checking in on.
So that's great. And I loved too, when you talked about Stuart, how you said, maybe he'll be my call tomorrow. So maybe the idea is make the list of people that you want to, and then go ahead and look and see which one is more comfortable really for a starting point, and go from there.
And my hunch is, and when this is done, I'll send it over to Stuart. I doubt he knows how important he was to me. He might, and he may not even remember it. And I haven't seen him in a long time, but my hunch is he'll be like, it meant so much to me. And so I'm not sure that we know how much we mean to somebody else.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that you say that. I had a couple of aunts that were really seminal in inspiring me. But one of them lived in England, and I really only saw her twice, and I never even met her until I was like 13. And so 2 years ago, I went to go see her, and she was definitely at that point living in like a, assisted care and more frail. And we sat and we talked, and I just told her of all the things and all the ways she had inspired me. And she was so surprised because, again, I hadn't even met her till I was 13. So it's the same kind of thing, let that, let the people know, because you never realize the impact that you're having. And it is really nice when somebody tells you and shares that with you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Diane. I think this is such a wonderful kind of conversation that we had about this one thing that you can do right now, of just kind of call one person to check in. I really think it's a great way to get good feeling going and help us get through this. And I would say it's probably a great habit to keep even after we get through this whole pandemic. Right?
It is. And I would say if a call feels too nervous, then write an email. Write an email. Before all this happened, I was cleaning up some of my old contacts. I was going through a database. I often do this over weekends, and I came across the name of somebody, and she had been in my workshop when she worked at Deloitte. I looked her up on LinkedIn. She had since left, and she was now living overseas. And I just wrote her a note and said, I'm cleaning up, and just thought I'd say hello. And she wrote me back this heartfelt note that she had gotten married, moved overseas. The marriage hadn't worked out. She was there now because of the children, and was managing a divorce and being a single mom and job hunting in a foreign country. And she said she was just struggling, and she's a person of color, so it was an even more complex situation for her. And so I said, let's just schedule a call. And in that country, Zoom isn't even allowed, so we actually used Uber Conference, which is another of the tools I actually quite like. And we had a really nice conversation, and it was on the phone, not in video. And she said, why would you bother, reaching out to me? And I was just like, well, you never know. And she was struggling with, connecting where she was. And I had said, well, it's hard to connect with people who don't know you. I said, I would encourage you to go back to the people who knew you at Deloitte and just say, it's been a while. Just wanted to say hello. And she wrote me the next day. She says, I have tears in my eyes. Look at the emails I'm getting from people who remember things about me that I didn't even know I had done.
Wow, that's a fantastic story, and so beautifully illustrates what you're talking about today. Wow. So Diane, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or find out more about you, where could they do that?
Well, the easiest place is my website, Diane, Diane, Darling.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, all of the other, Twitter, all the other social channels. But it's in the process. I'm redoing my website right now, so there may be a little bit of a few hiccups. At the moment, I'm taking advantage of this time to hire somebody to help me get this a little bit better in shape. So, but check that out there, and then and we can go from there.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for such a wonderful tip, Diane.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
To have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.